Hello and welcome to episode 31 of the Teachers Tea Time podcast. My name is Mark and I hope that you're doing well. This podcast is about, by and for anyone who has ever had anything to do with schools and education. That's probably almost everybody. We're proud to be a member of Edjacent, a design collaborative that connects educators to their legacy. Learn more at edjacent.org. I have a mug of tea ready, so let's sit back, relax, and get on with the show. In today's episode, we're going to continue our conversation with Edjacent designer Jared Fritzinger. If you remember last time, he was telling us a little bit about the capstone experience that he provides for his students. And today we're going to learn about the first 2 years of that implementation of a student-driven project. And we're going to also find out some interesting information about using cooking oil instead of diesel.
We started with capstone. We did capstone for like we were 7 or 8 years into capstone, and then the opportunity came along related to capstone, which is where I am right now, where my principal saw a Edutopia blog about people making stuff on buses, like school related stuff on buses, mostly STEM labs,
Yes.
buses and trailers. And she said to me, wouldn't it be cool if we had a bus? She didn't even say what it was for. And I said, yeah, I mean, I would love to have a bus. I could, I'd do something cool with it because I'm one of those people that's always interested in like a million things. That's my father and me. My father was a machinist at the shipyard. He can make anything. My grandfather owned a car shop. My father, built cars when he was a kid and was into carpentry and likes to hunt and built the house I grew up in and drew the plans himself. And he's that guy. He played guitar, He played football, and he's that guy that, like, if you go to my dad and you start talking about anything, he's got something to say about it that's generally intelligent, and if he doesn't, he's really interested in learning about it. And so, like, I definitely inherited that from him. So, like, one of the things that have piqued my interest over the years is people turning buses into houses and RVs. Yeah, super cool. So I was like, yeah, I mean, if I had a bus, I would do something cool with it. And so, like, Tim Cole, who's like the sustainability officer for Virginia Beach, like, emailed me one day. He's like, hey, I got you a bus. And I was like, oh, okay.
Now it's real.
Yeah, I was like,
yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, but I love people like that who just like cut through the red tape. Like, he just went down to the people at the bus garage and said, which one of these out of the fleet are you guys getting ready to sell? And they're like, this 1994 piece of crap. And he was like, cool. I want it for a kid project. And they were like, okay. And that, I mean, it's great watching the bureaucracy, like, just cut through all of that. It's cool. So, yeah, I mean, so I said, all right, what do we do with a bus? And then my capstone kids were like, what if we made a sustainability classroom on it?
Oh, fantastic. Yeah.
And I was like, all right, cool. And so I went to my principal. I said, we're going to make a mobile sustainability classroom. She goes, do you know how to do that? I was like, no. I said, I don't think anybody knows how to do it. I'm going to make up the rules as I go along. And to her credit, she's pretty much allowed me to do that. Pretty much unchecked for the past 3 or 4 years.
So
yeah, I mean,
it kind of came as a kid's idea from the capstone project to actually make it a sustainability bus. How much then have they had input into what the bus is going to look like?
Literally all of it.
Wow. Yeah.
This is the part where I end up underselling my contribution sometimes, but, like, all right, so how do I put this? Every significant idea about what it's going to be, from a 30,000 foot perspective, has come from the mind of an 8th grade student.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
But it says a lot about the talent of the person guiding that, because you're able to get it out. And that's really what, when we look at how teachers should be operating, that's the role. We should be getting that stuff out of our students, not putting stuff into the students. Mm-hmm. And so, you say you're underselling. I think it's the opposite. You leverage that, your ability as an educator to get the students to do that and to share their ideas and get them out.
Well, I call myself a facilitator, so I will present them ideas. I give them veto power over the ideas. So like some of the things that were essentially my idea were like, the bus itself runs or is outfitted to run on vegetable oil. Because I said to the kids, I was like, guys, it would be really stupid to have a sustainability classroom on a thing that belches diesel into the atmosphere. And they were like, yeah, that's kind of stupid. I said, well, look, here's the thing. There's a bunch of hippies in Oregon who made this, like, who are brilliant engineers who created this system called Grease Car that will run a diesel engine on vegetable oil, because essentially a diesel engine will burn anything. And this was me. I was like, all right, well, why does this thing work? So I just dove into it. And this is like a personal learning process too, which is one of the things that like keeps me going in all of this, because I'm learning just as much as I'm teaching. But, I learned that a diesel engine does not work like a standard, fuel injected engine, in that a fuel injected engine utilizes fuel air mixture to create a highly combustible thing that once you provide a spark to it, it'll explode, and that pushes the piston. Diesel engines have the same sort of piston-based structure, but they utilize high-intensity compression of fuel in order to light off the explosion that they need. So they don't use a spark plug. They use a thing called a glow plug. What that means is that a diesel engine will burn anything you want and will burn it efficiently if you can compress it enough. You could run hairspray if you felt like it. So you can run vegetable oil. The reason why vegetable oil is a good fuel to run is because it's everywhere and it's very easy. You can go get it out of the back tank
like
at places
restaurants.
They sell French fries. Strain the French fry crap out of it, and now you've got usable fuel. It burns very efficiently. So the only real problem is that it's kind of viscous. You have to have this stuff at the proper viscosity, else it would gum up the engine. So what these guys created was a system where you could heat up the vegetable oil inside of a tank and then pump it straight up to the engine. And the ingenious part of the system is keeping the fuel hot as it makes that journey, which they've achieved by some wild thing where they reroute hot coolant from the radiator.
What a great idea.
So they have a line within a line that reroutes hot coolant from the radiator and keeps the vegetable oil warm at the proper viscosity when it gets there. And the system is so ingenious that the guys at the bus garage, I presented them with the stuff and the schematic, and they were like, I think we can do this. And so they put one of their best diesel mechanics on it, and he did it. It took him about 2 weeks to figure it all out, but he rigged it up.
That's amazing.
And it's great because the kids got to be involved in that entire process, like watching it. He explained everything that he was doing, and then he took them for a ride in it, and like, it's absolutely seamless, and it smells like French fries. It's amazing.
Oh, brilliant! Must make me hungry though.
Yeah, so you get the thing up to operating temperature, and you go ahead and once it's up to operating temperature, the engines really work, because diesel engines also are like, they're notoriously finicky about starting in the cold. It's the reason,
you have to pre-light the glow plugs and stuff.
Yeah. So fun history fact, it's the thing that stopped the German advance into Russia in World War II. For all of our listeners who don't know that, but they got bogged down in the wintertime because they had diesel tanks, and suddenly the almighty Panzer had to be run 24/7 to stop from freezing up in the Russian cold. And as they penetrated deeper and deeper into the Russian interior, they're unable to continue to ferry fuel to the front. And so eventually, the tanks freeze up. And then when spring comes around, it's too damn muddy to get them out. And so, it completely stops the German war machine in its tracks. But, other than that, the diesel engine's great. And so, once it's up to operating temperature, you just flip a switch, on the console that they installed, and it just immediately starts using vegetable oil. And when you're done using the vegetable oil, you flip the switch the other way to a purge function, and it purges it all back into the container, and that's it. And so that was something that I wanted, and the kids were like, yeah, that's really cool, we should do that. The kids were the ones that insisted that it run on solar power, the interior components. So I mean, part of the money that I spent when I got grant money this year was to have that happen. And luckily I was able to find a community partner in a company called Convert Solar that did that work, and it was masterful.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Full array of solar panels on the top, this crazy looking like solar battery thing on the inside. It's all rigged up so you can plug in regular stuff. I mean, it's absolutely brilliant. And that's something the kids wanted. The next thing that they really want is they do want some level of rainwater catchment because they do have ideas for interior exhibits that have water.
Oh, cool.
And so they want that to be rainwater catchment from the outside. So again, it's going to be another one of those things. We're just going to have to find somebody who's like, oh yeah, that's cool. We can figure that out. And so like, yeah, everything that's happened has come from their minds. And so like, in year one, it was really Spartan. Like we had a bus and we had a group of kids that were like, yeah, I mean, you know, so we started formulating skeletons of ideas and they did get to do cool stuff. I took them to the bus garage and said, we need to get all the seats out of this thing. And like, they handed them a bunch of tools and like, dude, those kids like worked
Excellent
all day. And I've
Yeah.
never seen them have more fun. It was a school day too. I mean, we took a field trip down there and worked and like pulled 15, 20, 30 seats out of a bus until it was a husk. I mean, you know, I've never seen them happier. They were dirty. You know, that bus was nasty. It was so
you know, and you've got the gifted kids who very rarely get into these sort of hands-on dirty
Oh yeah, because the entire educational system has told them that using your hands is beneath them.
That's right. Yeah.
Which is funny because, you know, as soon as a few of them got a socket wrench in their hands, they were so excited.
Oh gosh, I can imagine. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's you know, you're bending the earth to your will at that point. You know, it's like there's something viscerally exciting about that. And I think also meeting like a diesel mechanic and like when you open up, I mean, most people, when you open up the hood of a regular car, much less a bus, it automatically is the most mystifying experience on the face of the earth. And like, I mean, I saw him crack that thing open. They saw this huge engine and they're like, oh my God. And then he explained to them and they were like, oh my, this is science. This is like, you know,
absolutely. Yeah.
You know, and from a guy who, you know, has grease stains on his face, but like they instantly saw the connection. Like this dude is just as smart as anybody who wears a tie on any given day and possibly more so. Like, you know, that's a fast. I try and reinforce that in my class all the time.
That's great because I mean it lets them understand that it's not. And one of the problems we have is we traditionally measure education who's smart. You know, this idea that you've got this brain capacity, which we know doesn't exist really. Yeah, everyone's got the capacity to do anything they wish. So it's who's got the expertise, and they're starting to see. And you've got 8th graders who have been told they're really clever, but they're starting to see that other people have areas of expertise that they don't have, and who socially may be different to them, and maybe they need to give that respect, and that's really powerful.
For sure. I mean, because it's like, yeah, you know, I think of so many things that people are completely mystified by, even your own house, man. Like, you know, some people when the water heater stops working, they have no idea. They don't know.
I'm done. That's me. I'm done. I have to go straight to the expert, and I love the fact that the experts are good at it and that's why I have a job so I can pay them. You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, it's nice
like,
to work. Yeah.
You know, but we've taught children that is somehow like, you know, that is somehow work that is not valuable. And like, I always tell my kids in class, I'm like, dude, I told him about my friend's a plumber. My friend came over one day. I had a sink that was like, you know, overflowing water underneath. And then I had like, you know, I had some problem with the thing on the shower. My boy came over. He replaced 2 gaskets that are smaller than a dime. And he charged me $100 to do it. And the kids were like, $100? I was like, yeah, he was there 20 minutes. And they're like, oh my God, why? I said, well, here's the itemized breakdown. The 2 pieces of rubber that he replaced, both were about 20 cents. The knowledge was $99.80 because he knew which pieces of rubber to replace and I didn't. And so that's what you get.
Absolutely.
You know? Well, I tell him the same thing. I mean, you know, my father used to say this to me all the time too, you know, being the machinist and everything like that and the mechanic. He was like, you know, 99% of the world, they stick the key in the ignition of the car and turn it and nothing happens and they just go to pieces. They don't know what happens. And that's why your mechanic charges $75 an hour labor fee, because most of it's just because he knows which piece to fix and you don't.
Absolutely.
You know, it's like, that was a good experience. And they've had lots of those good experiences. And then, so like year 2 really is when it ramped up. In year 2. And so again, this is the start of a theme that you'll see that it really sort of develops throughout this whole thing, where these sort of unknown, uncelebrated, maybe underappreciated people who operate outside of school buildings, but within the system have really been helpful. So, you know, Tim Cole came to me and said, you need some help, don't you? I said, yeah, absolutely. I need some help because, well, here, I'm going to get you some help. So he contracted out with a company, a local company called HBA Architects. And, you know, and they contacted me and said, we're really interested in the bus project. We want to help. And I said, okay, great. I'm forming a new cohort of kids. You know, here's where we are. And they said, cool. And so what they started doing was I started having regular meetings with my cohort of bus kids on Tuesdays and Thursdays at lunchtime. They have lunch, and it's always followed by 20 minutes of like study hall, because we break our day into 50-minute bells. They don't want the kids in the cafeteria for 50 minutes. It's a 30-minute lunch. So we call it lunch and we call it focus. So this dude named Mike, who is like pretty high up there. I mean, he's like a vice president. So we're not talking about anybody they weren't sending peons. You know what I'm saying? They were sending like the best and brightest. Mike and his assistant, Lauren, started coming on Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Wow.
And digging in with the kids. And like, that really was when we started like ramping up. So like, you know, that was when they were like, so some of the things I did, I mean, we identified an audience, and like the audience that we identified for this was going to be like elementary school kids who, the basic premise being that like at our school in the district, kids get a lot of sustainability training as part of their day-to-day from second grade through eighth grade. The sustainability, it's even woven into like the design of the building, because we had a new building built recently and much of it's like meets LEED certification. So our kids can readily spout that off, but I kept hearing from all over the district that that's not a regular facet of not just teaching in general, but I mean, even science, you know, in the district. And so I said, well, what if we could bridge that gap? Maybe the bus is a cool way to bridge that gap. And so the kids really latched onto that. And they said, so what do we want it to be? So they decided they wanted the interior to sort of be like this all-in-one sustainability museum. They wanted to have like, you know, interactive exhibits. Like if you went to like a children's museum, you could go in there and they're going to teach like different thematic elements of sustainability and be sort of an overarching piece of sustainability. And so we said, okay, so that's what we started working from with the premise. And then like, I said, how many kids want to do their capstone project as the Ecobus? And that's the other thing. Like it's a public school. I'm not rejecting any kid from it. So like I had 30 show up. I was like, what am I going to do? Brilliant. Yeah. I was like, what am I going to do with 30 kids? Like, you know, and some of them weren't mine. You know, we have 3 teams at the 8th grade level of kids. Like some of them weren't my kids. And I was just like, I don't teach these because I don't know them, but I'm like, all right, that's cool. You know? So I just said, I'll find a job for everybody. So I was like, well, now what do I got to do? All right. So you all are going to do curriculum and you all are going to do interior and exterior design. You guys are, you know, so I just made up groups, you know, it's like so much of this was like, the plane is now in the air, please build it. And so like the curriculum kids, I said, all right, well, here are the science standards for 2nd grade through 5th grade. Start digging into these. And then I like gave them a crash course in how to write, you know, UBD curriculum. Yeah. You know, the interior and exterior people, luckily I had 2 architects with me. So they started bringing those kids into this whole idea of like, how do you design a space? Brilliant stuff. You know, I had like a community outreach group. I had a documentation group that was just like filming stuff and taking pictures because I'm terrible at that stuff. And like, they were so immersed in it. And like this little group just sort of coalesced into doing all this stuff. I took them down to the bus and they took all these accurate measurements inside. We went back upstairs to the hallway that we work on and we taped the interior of the bus in an outline on the floor. They started doing stuff like they went and borrowed a wheelchair from the clinic to figure out like when you get on the wheelchair lift, will it turn? Can you do, you know, like, I mean, it just, and the architects were there with them the entire time, just kind of floating around and stuff. And then by the end of that year, we had come up with, I'd had a group of girls go over to the architecture, you know, to HBA's offices. They completely did a complete interior design schematic in SketchUp.
Wow.
They did a brand study. So like HBA brought in some partners of their own called 1717 Design from Richmond, who are branding and marketing people. They gave the kids a crash course in a brand study. The kids went down to my friend who's the art teacher and said, can we do an art contest if we give them the thing? And then they put all that stuff, the stuff that they liked, and they sat there and like plus deltaed all of it and gave all of that stuff to 1717, and that became the exterior design that was wrapped that we got this year. They came up with these, the curriculum coalesced into these conceptual designs. So HBA took everything that the kids did and like made these sort of like overarching visual concepts. They put all that on the wall, and they would sit there like at every session and like talk through all of them. They whittled all this stuff down to like a cohesive piece. I had a group of girls come to me who said that they were interested in disabilities and they didn't really know what to do. And I said, well, nobody's ever really thought about adapting spaces like ours to people with disabilities. And so they made this really beautiful docent manual called the Eco Inclusion Manual that's meant for all of the docents in future for adapting that space for people who have sensory processing issues, blindness, adaptive issues in terms of movement. That second year, like everything exploded, and it was crazy because like kids that started off the year, like, you've been a classroom teacher, or at least you've met enough of them. Like you sometimes identify kids early who are trying to lay out their markers, being the kid who's kind of like a pain in the butt or who's like a little edgy. We had one of those kids, and then he joined the curriculum group and suddenly was running that curriculum group and ended up being the science student of the year. Like, he became himself.
Yeah.
There's so much more to learn about the Ecobus and how that project has developed into year 3 and year 4. And that's going to be what we're going to hear about in the next episode. But until then, that was episode 31 of the Teachers Tea Time podcast. This podcast is a proud member of Edjacent, a design collaborative that connects teachers to their legacy. If you're looking for community, coaching, or content based around your needs, point your browser to edjacent.org and become a member for less than the cost of a pumpkin spice latte a week. So navigate to www.edjacent.org and choose Become a Member. For me, though, it's the stories of teachers, students, and school communities that matter. As such, this podcast is only possible with the help and support of its listeners. Please leave positive reviews wherever you are able. If you're an iTunes or a Spotify subscriber, leaving a good review can really help our visibility. One thing we all have in common is that we've been to school. Everyone has an educational story to share, not just adjacent designers. So if you'd like to contribute to the pod in any way, if you have a story to share, if it's long, short, tragic, or comic, if you have comments to make about the podcast or just want to say hi, you can send an email to teachersteatimepod@gmail.com. Or alternatively, you can send emails directly to me using mark@edjacent.org. I love to read what you have to say. Now, if social media is your thing, you can follow me on Twitter @MarkDearcop. You can find our contact information, copies of show notes, and you can download previous episodes of the podcast at www.teachersteatimepod.com. The podcast artwork was created by Phaedra. Opening and closing music was by Bryan Boyko. It's been my pleasure to be your host today. Thank you for listening.